Hello, my name is Allison Beeben, and I'm the Director at Child Development Resource Connection Peel, CDRCP, and the Manager of Play in Peel, a community partnership between CDRCP, the City of Mississauga, the Peel District School Board, Peel Public Health, and Sport for Life. On behalf of Play in Peel's leadership team, I would like to welcome you to our webinar on outdoor adventurous play. We are committed to listening to the voices of educators. So when ECEs, teachers, and recreation leaders in Peel all express the need to learn more about this topic, we approached the experts at the University of British Columbia's Play Outside Lab. Led by Dr. Mariana Brusoni, researchers investigate child injury prevention and children's risky play, focusing on educator, parent, and caregiver perceptions of risk and the design of outdoor play-friendly environments. Their work focuses on promoting equitable access to outdoor play and creating environments where all children can thrive. The team at the lab developed and delivered 3 full-day professional learning sessions for educators. This webinar includes highlights from that training. Children's experiences in outdoor play can positively impact their physical, intellectual, social, emotional, and mental health and well-being. We hope this webinar serves as a starting point for conversations with fellow educators, parents and caregivers, administrators, and leaders in your organizations so that the value of this play can be understood and supported. You will learn why children need outdoor risky play and how you can incorporate it into your programs and plans. Using real examples from early learning and childcare environments in British Columbia, the presenter showcases how childcare centers are supporting outdoor adventurous play through policies, practices, and modifications to the learning environment. It's now my great pleasure to welcome our friend and colleague, Rachel Ramsden, Research Coordinator from the Play Outside Lab and a PhD student at the School of Population Health, as she presents Stepping into Risky Play, Outdoor Adventurous Play in the Early Years. Thank you.
First, I guess just to get started, I want to just acknowledge I'm joining you today as an uninvited settler on the traditional territory and treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. I also am grateful to live, work, and play on the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Acknowledging the land and the territory is so important in this work. We are working with children who are going to grow to be stewards of the land, and so I'm grateful for those that have cared for these lands since time immemorial. Thank you for joining me on this journey today. We are going to be talking about outdoor play, risky play, your role as educators, your role as caregivers, how to work with families, and we're going to be talking about some maybe scary things about, how we promote risk and positive risk-taking with children. It's kind of a hard topic at times, but I know we can all do it, and I'm hopefully going to give you the tools. I know many of you work with parents and families. Is that true? Does everyone? Yeah, so we're going to also be working through a lot of tools with not just you as an educator, how to facilitate this type of play, but how to work with families. I know that's probably some of the hardest things is, you want to do this work and then you feel like potentially there's a bit of a barrier or a challenge when parents maybe are a little bit more nervous to engage in risk-taking with their child. So lots of things to learn today. For me, this is really what got me into this work is I, as a kid, was outdoors all the time, and now as an adult in my neighborhood, I just feel like that's kind of decreased for children. And I'm going to show you some of the literature that we actually have the data and the stats to show that that is actually happening. Here's a bit of an outline for the day. There's lots of breaks for movement. We're going to get outside in the morning and the afternoon. I am a research coordinator in the Play Outside Lab, and I do a lot of these workshops. I love coming and talking with educators. My PhD research is really focused on outdoor play and risky play in early learning, so under 6 environments. So that's really been a lot of my focus, but I've also done works with school-age children. My beginnings in this area was I actually worked in licensed school-age care for about 12 years through my undergrad, and then I went back to do my master's and ended up actually pivoting and working for the City of Richmond in urban planning. So I did community social development, childcare planning, and so looked at the design of childcare, worked in that for about 6 years and then decided to go back for my PhD. So I'm in year 4 of my PhD, hopefully done soon. And so that's kind of been my windy road to this area, but it's really been embedded in this desire to support children, in particular in the early years, to have that healthy foundation. What I would like all of you to do now is you can close your eyes, you can take a moment, but I want you to think back to your favorite childhood memory. So something that just comes up. It could be a special place, could be something you were doing. And I want you to think if you were inside or if you were outside. Yeah, if you were outside, you can feel free to raise your hand if you were outside. All the time, yeah, yeah. And this is very common, so this is why we do this exercise. But now I want you to think if you were taking risks or doing something challenging. Yeah. How many of you were doing something challenging or risky? Yeah. Now, I also want you to think if you were supervised. Was there an adult there? Yeah. Street lights, yeah. You played till the street lights came on, yeah. Or the sun went down, right? And so that's just a very common experience or feeling when we work with adults in this type of workshop. Everyone remembers their favorite childhood memory is, for the most part, being outdoors, taking risks, being outside, maybe getting dirty or messy, right? And, you all work with children. How many of you find that parents are scared of their child getting dirty, right? So that's something that, they're packing, I don't want to pack extra clothes. And it's hard because we have to clean up more. And so it's become, childhood has changed for children today than when we were children. And so part of this exercise and what I like to always think about why I got into this area is, can we bring back that aspect of childhood to children today? And that's what we're going to try and do today. And all of you can, leave today with that feeling and that motivation to at least bring a little bit back, right? And I know it feels like a big task and a big job, but each of you do so much in your work just each day. And so you might be able to change that one perspective or have that one experience with a child that they get more interested in the outdoors, right? Or in taking risks, in having challenges. So does anyone here think that children play as much outdoors as when we were children? Does anyone think that? This one's really interesting. So some of you might have seen this before, but I always like to showcase this where we're looking at how far 8-year-olds can walk on their own. And so in 1919, this is how far this big loop 8-year-old could walk, 6 miles on their own to go fishing. So not only are they participating in independent mobility, right? But they're also participating in, playing with tools. They're with a fishing rod, playing by water, right? So all these things that an 8-year-old can do. In 1950, the home territory was 1 mile into the woods. 1979, a half mile to a swimming pool. And then 300 yards to the end of the street. And this is from a while ago, so I imagine it would be quite smaller now. If to the end of the street was 10, 15 years ago, probably now we're at just in your backyard. You can't leave the house. So, it's not just us saying yeah, things have changed. No, things have actually changed, right? I have a few quotes spread out, and hopefully it's gonna, invigorate you to be passionate as we move forward. But this one is just saying, not every nature experience must entail a grand adventure to a scenic national park. Watching a caterpillar make its way across a sidewalk, or simply lying in the grass and watching the clouds go by in the backyard can be a great adventure to a small child. And this one is really one I like to start with, because when we have, this definition of outdoor play, which is a form of play that takes place outdoors, where the outdoors is defined as any open air, wild, natural, or human-made space. I think back to that quote because I think so often when we have this concept of taking children outside, we always look for that most perfect park or that beautiful forest or that tall mountain. And we have this idea that outdoor play has to be at this perfect outdoor location. And that's really doesn't have to be the case. I mean, yes, we'd love for children to be in, a beautiful park or forest every day, but outdoor play can also occur in, the balcony off a condo. It can occur at, your school field that maybe feels a bit worn down or that it needs a refresher. So this concept of outdoor play can occur anywhere. And that's really important. We're here in a city. I'm also from a city that's quite dense. And so we don't always have access to, that beautiful adventure playground. And sometimes for families, they're not accessible. So it's really informing, parents, families, and working with educators to learn that outdoor play can happen in a variety of spaces. And you don't need, that expensive playground to make outdoor play happen. I think most of you are aware of the benefits of outdoor play, but there's probably some you don't know about. So physical activity, we know that when children are outdoors, they move more, they sit less, and they also play longer. This, it all ties into physical activity, but some other areas of this is, spatial awareness. So when you think about when you're inside, you can only see, to the wall. You can't see beyond it. But if you're outdoors, you can see until you can't see anymore, right? Like it's endless, the amount of space you can see. And so this helps with spatial awareness, but there's impacts to eye health. So they found that children, there's this reduction in the risk of short-sightedness with children when they're spending a certain amount of time outside because your eye span is so much deeper and greater outdoors than indoors. So there's studies going on about these, different benefits of being outside for children. And one of the areas that we work with, or kind of this collaborative team, is there's researchers that are looking even at like the gut microbiome. So how that changes when children are outside. And so, warding off disease and reducing virus transmission. There's all these amazing areas of outdoor play research that's happening. And so, and I just wanted to mention, and we're going to talk about this, the mental health piece is also so important. And I know all of you that work with children probably see this every day, especially since COVID. But the outdoors can provide this soothing impact or effect for children, especially when you think about young children that are, having a hard day. Just getting outside can really soothe and calm. And then we also find the opposite, right, with children that just need to exert energy. If you get them outside for an hour, then you kind of get to see that, like, okay, there's that calming sensation after they've been outside for a little bit. So the outdoors is kind of that space that allows children to run, right, and to scream and to yell and to not have those restrictions on their behavior or their sayings or what they're feeling. The outdoors is really the perfect environment. And so we really see play as the engine of optimal child development. So it is the foundation. It is how to get children, a healthy start, how to get them into youth and adulthood, feeling confident, resilient, and able to take on challenges. So outdoor play is increasingly recognized as a foundation for children's healthy development, which is great. So we are gaining recognition in this area. I see a lot of nods, like we've been told this, outdoors is good. So how many of you are familiar with unstructured play? And it's also probably known as free play. Yeah. So we're all familiar with it. How many think that it happens like a lot these days? Unstructured or free play is really that thought or idea that children can make their own choice with what they want to play. So there's no adult direction. It's not adult-led. An adult might be there, but they're not restricting or directing the activity. And kind of just what you said, children now are, involved in more structured activities, right? So you think about them, children are kind of in the car going to school or childcare or, an early on program, and then they're going to soccer, and then they're going to music, and then they're going to, and so even when they're home, parents are so busy and families are so busy that even at home it feels structured, because it's like, I have to make dinner, so you have 30 minutes of screen time, and then you're coming to dinner, and then we have this and this activity. So everything is very lined up throughout the day. And when we think back to our childhood, how many of you remember a structured activity as your favorite childhood memory? Some of you might. I mean, I liked playing. I was a structured soccer player, and so I love thinking back to some of those, but it's not my favorite memory, right? My favorite memory is free play, right? I was climbing a tree on my own. And so I think that's important to think about, is that this has kind of reduced in children's lives, and that has to do a lot with, structure and supervision. And kind of what you said is that even when children do have the opportunity to have leisure time or free time, and that can happen in your programs, it could be, at recess or lunch, or, you're outside with your program, usually there's always an adult around either telling them what to do or restricting them. And that's not free play, right? Because now an adult is involved and telling or directing on, what to do for that activity. And so unstructured play actually has its own benefits. So when we think about when children are able to freely choose what they want to do, that promotes their self-esteem. They have autonomy and confidence that they're choosing and, actually liking what they're doing. By recognizing children as capable and giving voice to their ideas and opinions about rules, the educator or supervisor's role becomes more about facilitation and less about enforcement. Okay? This shift can dramatically change our relationship with children and give educators more time to engage and observe. Because if we spend so much time worrying about what their next step is, or if we're doing things right, then we're less likely to say, just watch them play and learn a bit more. Like, hey, this child actually needs more challenge. Like, they're bored, right? Or, hey, this child's feeling like this is a bit much for them. I might need to set up a more adult-led activity for them. And that's okay too. So the Canadian Public Health Association actually recognizes unstructured play as a child's right and a critical component to child and youth health and well-being. So it's there. We know that this is important, but it also, I would say, is kind of put out there like it's happening, right? When we say, oh yeah, we're doing free play time, and we're going to talk a bit about why maybe that free play isn't actually true free play, because even if you're stepping back as an adult, if there's only one thing set up in the environment, that's still not child-led, right? Because there's only one thing for that child to do, and an adult has set it up. So that's really adult-led. And a lot of what we're going to touch on today is going to be related to active play, a form of gross motor or total body movement in a freely chosen, fun, and unstructured manner. So we're talking about active play not as they're going to a structured soccer or baseball game. We're talking, or running a relay. We're talking about they are actively moving on their own choice, so in free play. And that's important. So it's just really separating the two as different. You have your structured settings, and then you have this great free play experience. There's actually a position statement on active outdoor play, and this was developed in 2015. And it's great that it's being recognized. And also here you can see it's saying access to active play in nature and outdoors with its risks. And we're going to talk about risky play next, but I want you to really think about active play, free play, and risky play kind of coming together as this one thing that we're going to work on today, okay? And all outdoors. So we are going to talk about risky, and I've also said adventurous or challenging play. And all three terms have been used kind of throughout the literature. We very purposefully use risky play. I know sometimes it feels easier to say adventurous play with parents, like, yeah, we promote adventurous play. That sounds, maybe a bit less scary than we promote risky play, right? But we really purposely use the term risky play to kind of put it out there. It's different. It's not, I guess with adventurous play, we could say we're going on a hike and this is an adventure. Risky play is like there's an element of risk. And it's really kind of making this statement that this is a form of play that used to be really common and it's not happening as much now. And I guess just, risky play is usually active, right? We think about challenges, that's usually moving your body in a way that there's an element of challenge. An element of physical activity. And so that's why they go so closely together. And the reason why we talk about it, all outdoors is because usually those challenges are outdoors, right? So this definition of risky play, thrilling and exciting forms of play involving uncertainty and the chance of physical injury. Can be scary at times to, think about it in this way, but we're going to work through it together. So when we work with, children, we ask them, like, how do you feel when you participate in risky play? This is kind of what we hear. It's thrilling, but I get a bit scared. It's scary and fun at the same time. It tickles in my tummy. So it's not fear. It's not uncomfortable to the point where a child is like in distress. This is that like thrill, right? You feel it in here. And so that's actually what a child said. It tickles in my tummy, which I'm like, that's such a good, description. I didn't know how to describe it before. So there's actually 8 types of risky play, believe it or not. And we're going to talk through all 8. There's some that you're probably already doing in your programs without even knowing. And I'm actually just curious, how many of you work with children under 6? How many of you work with children under 3? So you have all 0 to 6. How many of those are like little, like infant toddlers? Like quite a few? How many of you are working with school age? Some of us? Awesome. Okay, so these are going to apply to all ages, but they're going to look different for every age group. So that's just really important to keep in mind, right? So the first one is play at speed. So this can include sliding down a hill, swinging from a rope, running or biking really fast. And this one you probably see all the time, especially those of you that work with school age. You probably, see that lunchtime and you're just like, please go run, please come back tired. And so for the younger ones, it's going to look a bit different. Like it might be crawling really fast, right? Or if they're just learning how to walk, like the wobble really fast. This is going to look different for every child. So you might be like, that's tortoise speed. That child is literally, walking really slow. But for them, in the context of being low to the ground, they're moving fast, faster than they've ever, moved before. There's an element of risk to that because their fall is going to look different than, a school-age child who slips in the grass and takes a fall. So, that element of speed looks different for every child. It doesn't have to be running, right? You can be biking, rolling down a hill. So there's different ways that bodies can move with this. So I think rolling down a hill is a great example. And yesterday we had an educator who said that, sometimes they close hills when there's snow on them because they're too slippery. And I was just like, what? Really? And I can see if there's something at the bottom, right? Like if there's something at the bottom that's a hazard, right? Like we talked about, a hazard. But for me, when I think about childhood, like going down a hill, especially in the snow, like tobogganing or rolling down a hill is such an important part of childhood. But there's this fear that, it's not a safe activity anymore. But this is the whole part of like assessing hazards in the environment to know that you have a safe environment to do these risky activities. Play at heights. So this can include climbing a tree, jumping from a rock or play structure, balancing across wood logs. This one's really interesting because when we think about children, they're really looking up their whole lives till they're in adulthood probably, so, or have reached their heights that they're gonna reach. So by getting children to be at heights, they have a different perspective. And sometimes children just need that, right? When we think about great heights, something to consider is that children are better at climbing up than back down. And so this is an important consideration. It's like this rule of you have to climb up on your own. They might need a bit more support coming down, but they have to get up on their own. And this thought of spotting, like staying under something to support, is totally fine, right? That's not a bad thing. We often are like, oh, it's adult-led, I have to step back. But if that makes a child feel comfortable experimenting with heights, then that's okay. Play with tools. This one's one of my favorites. We need to teach children when they're young to do certain things so that as they age, they get those skills. But I know, for example, you know, when we think about a child using a saw, how many of you are like, that makes me nervous? Yeah, and that's okay, right? Because you're probably thinking about children in your program that have never even touched a saw before, right? So we're talking about, with these tools, you know, the baby steps to get to a point where children can feel comfortable and confident using these things. Yeah, because we can't teach a child to use a hammer if we don't know how to use one, right? So that's also a part of this. We also need to, you know, feel comfortable facilitating these things. They're very intuitive, right? So even if we know how to use a hammer, but we're like, I'm so nervous for this child to use it, they're gonna sense that. So we also need to feel comfortable and confident helping children to do these forms of risky play. And if we're at a point where we're not comfortable, then maybe we need to take a step back and find a different way or do something different. Dangerous tools, so developing these skills over time, and this is one of my favorite examples, is, you know, hammering golf tees with a wooden mallet. So golf tees are like nails, right? Wooden mallets are kind of like a hammer. So it's a good step in between actually, like, you know, using a hammer and a nail. And you can put them into the ground. You can put them into a cardboard box, or someone said styrofoam yesterday. So there's all these different ways you can facilitate this type of play without jumping to something that maybe your school might not allow, right, yet. You'll get there, don't worry. So play with dangerous elements is another one. This might be one that's less common, maybe, or maybe it is. You know, thinking about fire, snow, ice, maybe deep mud, dangerous terrains, steep hills. So this is kind of things that are in the environment that are actually like natural things that happen. But we've kind of said that they're like no-go zones for children. Some of you might have like water tables or hoses, sprinklers, things like that where you can expose children to water without actually like being at a creek, right? Or, you know, are there ways you can go on out trips or field trips by your program that, you know, expose them to these elements? Rough and tumble is really like there's that reciprocal fun between the groups or the individuals. And this could also be, you know, learning how to tumble or fall. So you can do this outside of just group play. And yeah, there's no like intention to hurt or harm. This is just that fun, like play wrestling, sword fighting. You know, I think yesterday, or maybe it was one I did a couple weeks ago, they were talking about sword fighting, like going on forest walks, and the kids would grab sticks and sword fight, and it was, you know, the pointy ends were something that always scared the parent or the adult, because you're like, yeah, that saying, like, you could poke your eye out, is just something that resonates. And I was like, well, I don't know if I've ever seen in our injury data someone poking their eye out with a stick. Sometimes children need that kind of rough and tumble balance of, yeah, they're working through something, or, right, this is just fun. This is a game, right? They've developed their own game or their own kind of fun that's usually physically active. And now as an adult, we've just come and stopped it. And so we've kind of told them that they're not capable of working, you know, with someone else to kind of sort through this type of activity. rough and tumble. So this is one of my favorite examples for this one is just like setting up an obstacle course, right? Can they learn how to roll or like crawl underneath something? That's a form of rough and tumble. Teaching them how to fall properly, learning how to tumble. Play with impact. Dropping items, smashing ice or snow, riding toys with wheels into walls. How many of you see that happen? Especially the young ones. I'm thinking like riding the trike and just boom into the wall, right? It's that feeling of impact. It's that sound. Children love that. I mean, it's, smashing things on the ground, that sound, that crash that we're always like, ugh, like, I don't like the sound because it's either startled me or, you're like, oh, something's broken or they've broken something. But children love those loud, like crashing sounds on the ground of impact. And this is kind of, hitting a tree with a stick. We've seen that one quite a bit too. So anything where there's an impact is a form of risky play. Vicarious risky play. So this one is, if you work especially with young little children, this one might be one you didn't know about, but is a really great form of risky play. It's actually when children just watch other children participate in risky play. So they're not actively involved, but they're watching. So you think about when you learn to ride a bike, what is probably the first thing you did? Observe, right? You watch someone else do it. Watching an older sibling jump from a stump. Watching someone else in their class climb a tree. Then they're learning, okay, that's where they put their feet, okay, and then maybe something happens. The child takes a fall, right? They're watching and learning and saying, oh, they just fell by doing that. Maybe if I were to do it, I wouldn't go as high, right? So they're learning those things even at a young age. So even like the youngest, like we're thinking infants, toddlers, like they are learning as they're watching. Play with a chance of being lost. This is actually, can also apply to young children. So yes, of course, at 3, we're not gonna say, please go get me milk and eggs from the grocery store on your own, right? So for children, they want that opportunity to be alone. And maybe in your program is the only chance they get to ever be alone. And they're not really alone. I mean, they're being supervised. And especially when we work with, educators in childcare, they have ratio, and I'm sure for all of you, you also have parents involved in school. They're always being supervised, but can we give them the feeling of being alone? So one of the best examples of this, one sec, I'll get to you, is there a nook or a hideaway where children can retreat to? And getting lost. The day I left in the morning, my friend phoned me and she's like, she has 2 children under 2. And she said, my kids just made a fort. And with his older brother, they learned and knew how to make a fort. And she was just like, this is a dream. And I was like, yeah, we should do this more often. Like, let them make a fort. Let them retreat. Let them hide. You don't have to be involved, right? Yes, you can be there to watch and observe and make sure nothing hazard or unsafe is going to happen. But, that's a form of getting lost and retreating. It really does take multiple levels to get on board with this. So all of you as educators and, working in the field, teachers, programmers, you have the opportunity to create change at the individual and in your program level. But I think you also can take this information and work to advocate to, the principal, the program leader, the cities, public health. We need to create a bit of a system change in policy level, but there's things we can do within our system as well. And hopefully after today, you'll feel confident to have some of those tools to do that. So that's kind of the whole theme of today is really those baby steps, but also kind of to your point, how you can work with parents, because I think I'm seeing the nods and like we all know this is good, right? Like we know that this is important, but it's easier to say, right, and listen to this today. It's a lot harder to go to your program tomorrow and then work with a parent who doesn't want their child to fall on concrete, right? That's a baby step, right? Getting them to run or walk on concrete, that's a baby step that we can address. Benefits of risky play, there's lots. We have self-confidence, resilience, executive functioning. Actually, there's studies that have shown there's a reduction in injury rates when children participate in risk-taking, right? So does anyone think maybe why that might be? Like why if children participate in risky play? Yes, in the white, yeah.
So to your question, like the reduction in injury
Yeah.
rates, perhaps that's because we're allowing children to really take ownership of their autonomy and understand the do's and don'ts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they learn from it, right? So when a child falls, you know, you see young children, they just fall like this, right? And as they get older, they fall differently, right? They fall on their side, they have learned how to fall, and that's because they've fallen before. And so if we don't let kids fall, or it's always a soft surface, right? If children always fall on carpet, they're gonna be like, this is fun. I wanna fall all the time. But if they fall on concrete and they scrape themselves, and obviously we don't want serious injuries, but if there's something where they scrape their arm, they're gonna be like, that hurt. I need to think about what I'm doing and do it differently next time. So exactly what you're saying, right? They learn something from it. And sometimes children fall and they get hurt and they just keep going, right? And sometimes they only cry if an adult is like, oh, are you okay? And then they're like, oh, I get attention, right? So it's that thought or that feeling that, you know, how we react to those falls also matters. So this reduction in injury rates is really something that the literature has shown. And so risk management skills, this really means keeping kids safe, means letting them take risks. And this is this development of this really important skill set that I'm sure many of you have noticed. Children aren't always getting or don't always have those skills as much as we would like, right? And some of that can even go down to, you know, they're at the playground, which is something maybe they go to every day, but that, you know, jump to go on the monkey bars that are a bit higher is something maybe they just never do because they haven't developed these risk management skills, or they just do it because they have never done the baby steps in between in early childhood. And that's when sometimes you can get more like of a serious injury because they try and do something that they've never tackled before. That's just a bit of too much of a jump. And so there's actually an impact on mental health and, you know, these anxiety management, self-efficacy, emotion management. And one really interesting one is a study found that, you know, getting outdoors and participating in risky play can actually have an anti-phobic effect. So a lot of us might be afraid of snakes because we've never really encountered one before, or spiders because it's something that we don't see as often, or we just avoid all the time. But for children, if they're outdoors, right, there's these actually anti-phobic effects that some studies have shown. So what isn't risky play? So this is really important. It's not neglect. So neglect would be like, see ya, go climb that tree, and then I'll see you in half an hour. Like, it's not leaving them in a dangerous situation. It's not recklessness. So when we think about like rough and tumble play, for example, you know, it's not a child's reckless and not in control of their body and they're, you know, making aggressive movements. It's not recklessness. And it's not pushing children beyond their abilities or interests. So we need to also recognize children's, you know, their, I guess, comfort zone, but also their body language, their movement. So we don't want a child to be in fear, and we don't want them to be in distress. So we want them to feel comfortable, but also being a bit outside that comfort zone. So a bit uncomfortable is okay, but distress or this extreme fear, that's something we want to avoid. So keeping them kind of within their abilities and interests, and that interest piece is really important because, you know, tomorrow you're not going to go to your program or school and be like, I've learned that you need to climb a tree, so climb, right? It's what they're interested in. So, you know, working with the children, and so a child might be like, I never want to make a fire, or I never want to climb a tree, and we can try to, you know, get them interested in it, but we can't force a child to do something that is beyond what they're interested in or their abilities. And that's really important. It's not a forcing this on them. It's really like working gradually to almost like, you know, when you give children language where you kind of alter how you say it. So you're not telling them to do something, but you're like, oh, I'll time you if you want to clean up, right? Like How fast can you do it? It's, there's ways in which we can bring this forward without, telling a child to do X or Y. And so a hazard is a danger in the environment that can seriously injure or endanger a child and is beyond the child's capacity to recognize. So us as adults, we have a lot more knowledge and experience than children. We can recognize hazards in the environment. We can recognize that, when we do a sweep of the environment, that there might be hazardous things that are there that a child would never know. They would just run. They wouldn't know to look at the ground, to look for dangerous items. And an example would be like a broken slide. A child's just going to see a slide. We're going to realize that there's something wrong and there poses injury. It could break. Fiberglass could break off, could poke a child. There's things here that there's something wrong with this environment and we need to prevent a child from playing on it. A risk is like, this is a bit scary and makes me nervous, but I've checked the environment and this is a safe item or fixture or equipment or environment for a child to play on. Another example of this would be, a risk would be a child on a steep slope with a bike. A hazard would be a child without a helmet, right? So we know helmets protect, they reduce injury, they are, important safety measures we put in place. So we know children need to wear helmets when they're on bikes, but children can ride a steep slope, right? That's a risk. And it's also this thought about thrill versus fear. So thrill is really this feeling of that tickle, that joy, and fear is, that I'm nervous, I'm scared, I don't like this feeling, I'm in distress. And so the thrill is that risky play. The fear is kind of that, we need to step in as adults and address what's going on here. And so a fear could be, there's two children jumping off something. One child is expressing thrill and wants to jump, and the other child's expressing fear, but there's a peer component there of pressure. And they're like, he's doing it or she's doing it and I want to do it, but I can't. And then as an adult, we can step in and offer another option, right? And we'll work through some of that. But here's a place a little bit farther down that's a shorter jump, right? So we can identify body language and, expressions to know that we want to encourage this thrill. We want children to feel thrill, not fear. We are going to talk just a bit about how outdoor and risky play relates to physical literacy. We have kind of, this idea that running, throwing, catching, jumping, skipping, hopping are all really important fundamental movement skills. These are all things that happen when you're participating in risky play and outdoor play. They just happen naturally, right? And so now when I work with childcare centers, I think about it and, when the leaves fall and they're like, hey, look at this leaf, right? Or there's a snowball that they're throwing. That's how they learn to do things like throwing and catching. It's through play, right? We don't line them up and just tell them to throw with a group. We watch them play, and then we can maybe teach, and we can provide prompts, and maybe they need a little bit more support to learn these things. But learning through play is really the fundamental key ingredient here to learning these types of skills. And there's way more skills they participate in, so like spinning, hanging, bouncing, climbing, dancing, and falling. We also know that each additional 20 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity by a parent is associated with an additional 5 minutes in their child's daily physical activity. And so this could mean that a child's just watching a parent participate in physical activity, and so then they know, okay, my mom or dad or my caregiver or grandpa, grandma, they're going outside for a walk. That's pretty neat. Or they're going to say, like, my caregiver or my family member's on their screen. That's what I want to do. Right? So children mimic what their role models, their adults in their lives are doing. So this is kind of an accurate description of where we're at. We're getting away from, children being outside to being in front of screens. And we know that this has changed, physical activity levels for children. In 2022, there was 28% of Canadian children 5 to 17 years meeting physical activity guidelines. It's not very much. And the guidelines indicate actually that 3 to 4-year-olds should have 180 minutes of physical activity a day. How many of you think that, like, I'm thinking about 3 to 4-year-olds here. So those of you, how many of you think that children meet that 3 hours of physical activity a day? No. So, I mean, anecdotally, we all know that, like, children are not meeting the requirements. And I always say, like, those requirements are like the baseline, right? Like, it's not even just meeting them, we should be exceeding them. And we actually have been doing some work with grandparents where we've tried to say, you know, you can let children be more independent, because that's sometimes the hard part too, is they feel like they need to, you know, be with them every step of the way. And so part of that might help exactly what you're saying, if they can take that step back. If they feel confident that the child can do things independently, then they're not feeling like they need to supervise the whole time. This idea that children's leisure time has changed. So, you know, what they choose to do in their free time is different, right? They're on screens. They're in structured activities, right? They're not just going to the park on their own and deciding what to do. We also know that children have reduced freedom now. So we have parks and playgrounds that are set up that say walk, don't run, right? Well, if children can't run at the playground, then where can they, right? And, you know, some of the things from these signs are no running, no climbing, no swimming, no use of equipment when wet, no bare feet, no hanging around, no, 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 right? What can a child do? What is that telling them, right? We're telling them that they aren't capable of doing things safely on their own, or they're not capable of choosing when to run and when to climb. This is kind of the big one that a lot of you have touched on. We're on this like anxiety-based caregiving, right? So we know that as parents and educators and teachers, and it's always safety first, and we want to prevent anything bad from happening, right? So that's normal, and we know that that's a common thought. We have a lot of fears. We're kind of sent messages from the media of all the bad things that happen. But we have data to show that the risk of things is not high. Then we've also seen injury, like mortality rates from injury among 0 to 19-year-old children decreased dramatically since the 1950s. Who here knows why that might be? Inside? Seatbelt, thank you. There's an injury researcher there. Seatbelts and helmets. Helmets are a big one too, but seatbelts is the major one. And so we've done things that have really safety, like improvements in our society, which are great. Like we need these advancements, seatbelts, helmets, you know, making cars safer, making sidewalks, intersections safer. But we've also know that with these safety measures, we've made it hopefully easier for children to do things like ride their bike, right? Like walk to school. We've, you know, have sidewalks that they can walk on. So this anxiety of bad things are going to happen, you know, in the data we're showing that children are actually safer now. You can't just say as adults, you must go outside during these times and only in these certain times of the day and only this many times a day, right? Children should have more of a say of when they want to be outside. So something that I kind of think about when I think about this time outside, as adults in most of your programs, you're the one saying, you know, or choosing when kids go outside. And I probably could guess for many of you, it depends on if you want to go outside. Right? Is that the case for some of you? Or parents?
I was gonna say also, I think sometimes like I'm noticing that like not all my students are prepared or dressed appropriately to go outside.
Oh, the role you play as an educator is so important, because if you don't want to go outside or you choose not to go outside, then you're actually determining that, okay, this child or these children are not going to go outside either. Some kind of ideas that we've heard from programs is you can, you know, take normal indoor activities outside. So any of you can do that. You probably hear it, but it may seem hard at times. But even just like eating outside, we've had programs that have done like childcare programs that have done nap time outside. You can think about also, it doesn't have to be a block of time, right? You can have short bursts of time throughout the day. So there's kind of this thing where there has to be enough time for children to engage in something. If it's only 20 minutes and you find your group is like restless or they're not, you know, succeeding in something outdoors, then yeah, let's bring them in and let's try them again in a couple, you know, an hour or so. So it's kind of that thought that there's not a set amount of time, but you also need that deep engagement when they're outdoors so they're not feeling like they're being cut off from their play. So we're going to talk about the weather piece. This one's hard, and again, normally I talk to our Vancouver educators, and I'm like, look what they do in Ontario. They go play in the snow, but I can't use that example here. So I can say, look at the Vancouver educators. We go out in the rain. Licensed childcare programs, and the one I've looked at is Manitoba and Nova Scotia have this limit that kids can go outside until it's minus 25 degrees with or without a child. Is it 21 here? Okay. So, I mean, when I think about that, that's crazy to me because in Vancouver we never really get that cold. And so, for me, I'm like, kids can really go outside and in, you know, pretty extreme, well, not extreme, but cold temperatures, wet temperatures. Like, there isn't a rule that says they can't. And so really the main thing is that children are properly dressed. That's the most important thing, and you hit on that. The way children are dressed and the way adults that are with them are dressed is really going to determine the play. So if children are cold, they're not going to do anything. They're going to sit and be unhappy, and then you are going to be unhappy because you have to deal with that child, right? And so how many times, like, they don't have the proper gloves, or they don't have the proper socks, or their feet are wet. And, you know, you end up just having to bring them back inside because they're not participating, and they're in distress, and they're not feeling well. The biggest thing you can do is get parents on board, and something like this, like an infographic that goes home with them, that they have to come with these articles of clothing, and you're saying, like, all children are going outside under these conditions. Like, this is it, rain or shine. And so there's a way there that you can work with the parent to say, these clothing items have to come every day because your child's going outside. And so if you want this to be a positive experience for your child, then this is what you need. And then, of course, there's the financial barrier, then maybe thinking about a program that the school or the center can do to have, or even like a set for like 5 sets per class or something. So I know that's hard, that's more of like a policy and programming level, but it is being done in some countries. And some programs in BC we've worked with have done that, where they have like a company or a donation like avenue that they work with. I saw a hand.
So we have actually parents together with children, so we do notice that children get dressed, but parents don't.
Yeah.
So if they come outside, they're really cold and
The parents,
and
yeah.
don't want to stay outside.
And this, you can use this with parents, right? Like, even though these are children, make the parents follow this, because that's the big thing, is parents and educators have to also be dressed appropriately. Because if you're sitting there like this, right, do you think a child's going to be like, yippee, this is so fun?
Most of the children, because we are in school, they love to play with the snow. They make a snow, snowballs, snowboard. All of them they prepare because for the school they have to go outside. This is why we didn't like have any like kind of restriction on this, unless if one of the child they don't want to go, but we encourage them to go outside and play with them. This is, I think, on Ontario here, we have to do that. Because we get to use it. All the children, they know snow pants, snow boots, half mitten, everything if they need like to help, that's it.
What about rain gear?
No.
Yeah.
We will not go outside.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing is, right, it's the
But it
same.
is like there is a link or something we can go, but if it is heavily rain, no.
Yeah, which is, I just find this fascinating.
Yes, they haven't talked about extreme
and-
it was just
Well,
a little rain.
And it's so interesting because, yeah, Vancouver, like any rain, kids go out. Like it's just torrential downpour, kids go out. But when you are encountered with an environment situation where you're like, oh, this is a bit uncomfortable, then you're just going to be like, I don't want to do it, right? That's getting ourselves outside our comfort zone a bit. That's why kids need to come with all these things. kids, right? Like they have to be prepared for any weather condition, right? It's so important. This is another infographic that it might be helpful if you, I'll send the slides, but some of these are just good to have. You can send to parents, you can have at your bulletin board, like this is the expectation. Kids need to have this type of gear. If you're in childcare, you're in ratio. If you're a teacher, obviously you're educating, but you're also supervising at times, right? When the hours they're in your care, you're playing a supervisory role. And even those of you that have parents in your program, you still have an element of that. Like, I think parents probably look at you like, oh, is my child allowed to do this? And you're making the decision on that task. But this really limits children's outdoor play choices, because that supervisory role is always going to go to, I'm scared the child's going to get hurt. I'm afraid other parents may see this as neglectful. You know, you're always thinking about the what ifs and the worst case scenario. That's just natural when we're supervising. So one thing we have is kind of like the 17-second rule. Has any of you heard of this? Have any of you heard of this? No. Okay, so this is really, you know, when you're outside, you know, you're working with children, you can use this rule with your parents that you work with, and you immediately want to step in and stop an activity. 17-second rule is take a step back and then work through some steps I'm going to tell you to decide if you need to stop that activity. And this is really the risk aspect of things. So, trying to give an example. So, you know, if there's something immediate happening, like a dangerous activity, a dangerous situation, yes, we intervene right away. But how many of you have said, were all of you working in the field yesterday? Like with children? How many of you said be careful yesterday? We can be honest. I probably said it. Yeah. How many of you said no? Yeah. How many of you said stop? Yeah. Right? But what do we tell children when we say that? Stop, no, don't, be careful. We're telling them that we don't trust them to do something.
No, just reminding. Sometimes they forget when they are playing, even soccer ball. They talk and they remind the other side.
Yeah.
And they hitting each other, they taking, we need like attention, be careful. Some people, they are.
Yeah. I'm going to give you some tools.
Okay.
Things to say instead of be careful. Okay. It's coming. Don't worry. Because yes, there are things like, of course, if there's something going on that's dangerous, but there are ways to maybe frame be careful in a different way. As adults, we don't like to be told these things, so children are going to have the same feeling. They're going to be either like, don't tell me what to do, or they're going to say, you don't trust me, right? And so what I'm doing right now is wrong, or something bad about it. And so you're automatically saying, second guessing, and you're thinking, you know, this isn't okay. So these are kind of the steps you can take during these 17 seconds. Doesn't have to be 17. If it's 10, if it's 5, if you start off with 2 and you're like, ugh, I need to say it, we're getting there, baby steps. So you can stop before you immediately respond and say be careful. Look and listen to what is happening. So kind of assess the situation. What are the children doing? Think, are the children managing the risks? And this is a big one. What might be the impact of adult involvement on children's play? Like, so if you stop this activity, what might be the impact on this play? Are you stopping it completely and it's not going to resume again? Right? Because that is kind of the worst case, right? If you stop something that doesn't need to be stopped, the children probably aren't going to continue, or they're going to do it a different way. Act. So now you can decide, do you need to step in, right? This is escalating to a point that I don't think, you know, is going in the right direction, so I'm going to step in. And then reflect. So you can reflect, even if you do step in, you can always reflect and be like, did I do the right thing? Should I do something differently the next time? And then did you learn anything? And so here's some tools, what to say instead of be careful. Most of these are great for younger children, and you can adapt them for older children, right? So I'm trying to give kids are play fighting with sticks, being like, hey, so-and-so's behind you, they don't want to play in this activity, can you take it elsewhere, right? So there's ways in which you can kind of adapt this to make it more usable for your age group. But there are things that you can also work with parents on. So sticks need space, look around you. This is from the Child and Nature Alliance of Canada. There's things you can do with this to even just entice conversation. Here's some more rough and tumble play with great speeds. Should we move this game to a more open area? Please find a safe spot for your stick while you're running. So just things you can say instead of be careful, right? Because these are having the conversation with the child, talking to them about it instead of immediately shutting down the activity. We need to give them the tools to understand maybe why we've stepped in, because then that's going to help them understand, was that actually an unsafe thing to do? Or do I just need to adapt it? Or is it something that maybe I'm actually really allowed to do, and maybe I was, brought or stopped too early, and then I have the conversation with the adult. So if you say be careful to everything, it almost becomes redundant, and then when you actually might need to use something like that's an unsafe situation, then children are like, well, you tell me that all the time. So it's that teaching component is lost a bit. Children crave change. They need something different to engage them in outdoor play. And so part of, even if you only have one space, you can't take your children anywhere else, that's okay. But this is some of the work we do. So we work with childcare centers and schools, and we collect a lot of data, but we actually go in the field and build stuff and plant and work with the children. So we're very hands-on as a research unit. And we worked with 8 childcare centers in Vancouver, and we did this really comprehensive outdoor play program with them. And we worked with the School of Architecture and Landscape Architecture with Professor Susan Harrington, and I'm going to give you some of her resources. She and her students did such a great job working on some modifications to the built environment, and very low cost items. So things that you could bring in from your home, maybe from down the road. So these are some of the things we worked on. Now, there's one photo there where there's kind of like the cedar log, the second one in. That was a more extravagant one, and I'll show you a photo of it. But we did some planting, and we worked a lot on kind of teaching children how to plant. The 7 C's is kind of there's 7 C's, and it's kind of the framework that Susan Harrington has put together. And it's really a good, helpful tool to guide children's outdoor spaces and things you might want to consider when you're thinking about the physical space. So you have a field, you have a playground, you have a park, but what can you do a bit differently to change it up so that it's more enticing for children? So the first one is character. So this is the first C, character. And this is really like what makes your space unique. So something that just draws them in. Context is the next one, and this is kind of what's around your play space. So it's also thinking about maybe asking the kids some of these things, because again, the spaces we built as adults are maybe not resonate, or maybe aren't what resonates with children. Connectivity, so how you get from one space to another, and so sometimes that's like a long pathway that children can run to. So this was a sandbox on one end and a play structure on another, so kids would just like sprint back and forth. So thinking about how children move around the space. Is it super cluttered? Is it like a giant field, but there's nothing on no spaces that they want to get to and from? One of the things we looked at was just, can you create like pathways? So it's kind of that pathway idea. Can you put pathways in places that maybe haven't ever been walked in before? And so can you use spaces a bit differently that maybe aren't utilized very often? So challenge, this is the big one, to think about how you can bring challenge into your space. These are kind of some examples, and it can go anywhere from, we had this one center that had a big slope, and they put like boulders and tires and logs to make it more uneven. So instead of just walking or running down a normal slope. Now you had things you had to kind of navigate. And when we talked to children, this concept of choice was really important for challenge. So I think I gave this example where there was a child jumping off a structure and a boy was a little bit nervous, so we got him to jump off a smaller step. Sometimes bringing anything where children can climb onto, a milk carton, a cardboard box, logs, stumps, you can make a very underutilized space enticing for a child. Just kind of a way to make an underutilized space that is not necessarily like you have to spend a bunch of money. Change is another one. It's another C. So how does your space change through the seasons? So this one has like a bunch of leaves on it right now in the fall, but in the summer it's going to look very different. So sometimes we think about like, okay, let's just rake the leaves, let's get them out of there. But you know, a space covered in red leaves is something that's very exciting for a child when, you know, 2 weeks before it looked completely different. So thinking about maybe keeping some of those elements out so that it provides that change to a space. Chance, so this is how does a child make an impression on a space? So if you have a school field, are there areas for them to garden? And the last one is clarity. And so this is just how easy it is to navigate the space. If kids go to the same place every day, like is it the same playground that they have at their school every day?
Yep.
Right? It's a fixed piece of equipment. It doesn't provide a different opportunity. It doesn't provide that change. Right? So a loose part in your bag, something that you throw out, is different every day depending on who plays with it. What it's like, is a ball, or is it, you know, a bowl? I don't know. Is it something else they want to make it, right? Yeah. Is it now like a stool? They are different every day, so they change as you play. They're movable, they're open-ended. So yeah, here's just some of the loose parts that we implemented to tackle some of the C's that I talked about. So I'm gonna flip through them pretty quickly, but might give you some ideas. We had some arches and some rolly items that children had to learn how to balance on. We also had like things that they could construct. Water features, so anything you can put water in. Natural elements, so we planted like potatoes. These canvas bags are great because you can move them around. You can keep them in your classroom at times. You can bring them back out depending on the day. Communicating with parents. So I have a few tips for this one. And I use this picture very purposely because my number one kind of tip I can give you is that, you know, do talk to parents in person. We want to learn in person. We want to talk about our child in person. So I know that's hard to do at times. We've been in an era where everything's been online, but in person is really the best connection. Best way to educate about all of these things I've talked about. I know we have apps now. I don't know if Early On uses apps or teachers, but in BC we have like these apps that childcare centers use to like send updates throughout the day. But that kind of makes it so that parents don't ever have to have that physical in-person communication because they get everything by an app. So try and make those times to connect in person. This is something this is one of my resources I'm sharing. But in here I have some pages from the Risk Benefit Assessment for Outdoor Play. It's a Canadian toolkit. It's very long, but you can also download it on your phone. It's free. It is awesome. And it has things like this, which is risk assessment, site risk assessment form. And so this is kind of like a template. So this is for a school age program playground in the forest. This is just an example, but they have blank ones. And you can look through like what are any risks you might see. And then you can actually outline a decision you make and the actions you take. It really helps you work through, okay, here's my environment. This is what I want to do. What are potential risks that I see that could come into play? What is the action I'm going to take? And so some of these steps are helpful to work through with parents to say, this package also has like an informed consent template you can have. So you can say, hey, this is the approach we're taking. We're gonna let children engage in risky play, but here's all the things that we do to mitigate any potential hazards or serious injury. And so it's really engaging parents before to say, this is the approach and this is what we believe in, and we want you as a partner on this. You're part of this journey as well.